welcome to a brand new episode of Bearish or Bullish. I'm Julie Alexandria with JC Peretz. Let's talk about year two. What? Year two, bearish or bullish? Well, what is all this talk about year two, JC?
Well, I think it's bullish if you are ready for it and you're prepared for it. And year two is just, classic market behavior of the second year of bull market cycles, right? I think you're going to be hard pressed to find people that, would argue that last year wasn't a full, strong initial thrust, ending a bear market. In many cases, bear markets that had been lasting for multiple decades, right? So don't think just the United States, think about Europe, think about emerging markets. So that was that final puke low. We get the initial thrust over the first year. And then what happens in many year twos that we've seen throughout history? Chop, 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 right? Choppy, messy market, really digesting those gains. Look at 2010, right after that 09 thrust. Go back to 1983 after that initial 82 thrust. Even after the tech bubble burst and we had that initial thrust in 2003, look at 2004. Go back even further, 1976 after that 75 thrust. Again, chop, chop, chop. So, to me, I think it would be perfectly consistent with history to have a messy market. And we've been seeing for a few months, but as more data comes in, it just continues to confirm, yes, in fact, we need to be prepared for a choppy mess to persist, right? Messy for longer is the underlying theme. So to answer your question, bearish or bullish, I'm bullish if that happens because we're expecting it and we'll take advantage of that market, right?
But when it comes to messy markets, time frame wise, what are we looking at here and what's your approach?
Listen, in all of those years that I talked about, 2010, 2004, 76, 83, none of those were the beginning of the end. In fact, they all proved to be really the second inning of major moves. Stocks after that digestion, sure. Was it frustrating for long-only portfolios? Sure. But after that, stocks went on to make much, much higher highs. The 80s was fantastic, right? 2004 through 2007 was fantastic. 2010, the markets ripped for a decade, right? So they all proved to be launching pads. Frustrating while the launching pads were being built, but launching pads nonetheless.
Let's talk about crypto. Ethereum making all-time highs. Talk to me. I'm kicking myself for not getting in.
Julie, maybe you should watch some of these videos that we make together, right?
I need to.
Listen, I'm thrilled, right? I've been paying myself in Ethereum instead of in US dollars, so it's kind of like getting a raise, I guess. Listen, 2250, that's the level. It's been hanging in there. The fact that it hasn't really sold off from those levels, I have to consider that as bullish, right? So if we maintain that 2250, we're above those levels. I think you got to be long, right? The next target's 3600, but just keep in mind, we start breaking below 2250, we start holding below 2000, then I think it could get messy after that. But as long as those levels hold, and so far they have, I think you got to own it.
But in your mind, how does Ethereum compare to the other cryptocurrencies out there?
It's a leader, no doubt, outperforming Bitcoin, particularly recently. You can also argue that owning Ethereum now, after that breakout above the 2018 highs, is like owning Bitcoin at 20,000, right? Because the patterns are very similar. So the weight of the evidence continues to point to me, Ethereum, and not to get all too fundamental with you, but the only thing that I've actually transacted with and purchased things is using Ethereum. I've never bought anything with Bitcoin. So add another check mark for the Ether crowd.
Okay, Ethereum is the Jake Cronenworth of crypto. We like it. All right, let's talk new leadership, defensive assets, gold, bonds, yen, bearish or bullish?
We never saw bonds getting a bid or gold getting a bid or yen getting a bid. We haven't seen that in a minute. Not to mention the defensive assets, staples, utilities, REITs, gold miners. These things have not been leaders. They've been the opposite, right? They've all been going down, which is consistent with a stock market that's going up when there's no need for those defensive assets. But now that you're seeing a bid in those, what does that say about the overall market? I think it continues to point to this being year two, right? Let stocks digest. Let the others have a chance, right? The gold bugs have really gotten beat up. All these bond bulls got slaughtered. anything defense. It was a flight away from safety and into risk assets like stocks and commodities. So I think some time to catch up and a bid in these defensive assets, I think is normal, warranted, right? And not unprecedented.
All right, I think I know the answer to this one, but bearish or bullish financials breaking out above '07 highs. Talk to me.
Yeah, listen, it's gonna be tough to make or to convince me to make a structurally bearish call on either financials or the overall market if the XLF is above those '07 highs, right? This, again, continues to point to this being year 2 of a big bull market as opposed to the beginning of the end, right? 2010, 2004, 83, none of those were the beginning of the end. They were that launching pad. And I think the financials chart, and you can also argue Europe too, really kind of tells the same story, breaking out of this monster base. But financials for sure, even if we didn't have the Europe thing, let's say it was just financials, that's a big one. You know, that's arguably the most important sector index in the world. So as long as financials are above those '07 highs, you know, the bet is messy for longer, not the beginning of the end and the beginning of this epic bull market.
And keeping on with a positive, let's talk some stocks that are absolutely ripping when it comes to lumber, iron, steel, rebar, ore, all the things that you need for industry. Bullish or bearish here?
Listen, I mean, if it was just one of those, if it was just lumber and they're like, oh, lumber's a bubble, maybe lumber's in a bubble. But if lumber's in a bubble, then rebar futures are probably in a bubble too, and steel futures are in a bubble, and iron ore futures are in a bubble. Maybe it's not so much that they're in a bubble as it is, maybe there's just a lot of demand for those things. You know, I don't want to be Mr. Fundamental, but maybe people want to build stuff and they need to buy all these things that you need to build stuff. Maybe it's that and not so much a bubble. How's that?
I like it. I can agree with that. Okay. You don't want to get too far ahead of yourself with saying it's a bubble. I understand. All right. Bullish or bearish, the proposed European Super League?
Listen, I'm not like Mr. Soccer guy, right? I'm a baseball player, football, basketball. That's really where I live. That's my zone. I try to stay in my own lane. But my understanding from my colleagues and friends that are big, especially the ones that live in Europe, like this is no bueno. This was a money grab, and the people have spoken. You know what's really interesting to watch from the outside, because I don't have a horse in the race, right? Like if it was like the Miami Dolphins or the Canes or the Heat or something, I'd be like, no. But like I'm watching from the outside. But what I notice is communities coming together, right? You know, showing their voice, right? Saying, no, this is not okay. This is the tradition. This is what we love. And by the way, we all agree. So listen to us. And the owners, they had to listen and essentially beg for forgiveness. And, you know, I'm all about power power to the people. So to me, it's pretty cool to watch.
They did a snap poll and 68% of UK soccer fans would agree with you, or football fans, I should say.
There
All
you
right,
go.
let's head on over to the AL East with the Yankees sitting in their mom's basement. Bearish or bullish, too soon to yell fire?
Yeah, probably. They got a big payroll. They got some big bats. They'll start hitting them.
And keeping with the New York sports theme, the Knicks tweeting out, hey, New York, we're here. Putting up the 40 spot.
How about that? Listen, I'm from Miami, so I mean, I don't care whether the Knicks lose or not, or win or not, but I will say this, it's good for the league. It's good for basketball as a sport. Like, if the Knicks just always suck, like, that's just not good for the league. It's not good for the sport. Like, New York's a big city, particularly in basketball. Chicago, too. Maybe not to the extent of New York, but Chicago, too. The Bulls being good, the Knicks being good. It's good for basketball. I'm all for it. I'm rooting for them. I root against them. They're in the East, and when they play the Heat. But bigger picture, I'm happy. And kudos to Tubbs. Bringing that defense back. This was like the worst defense in the league. Now they're playing great D. And imagine if they start scoring some points too, they're going to be a good team.
Mm-hmm. Listen, there's nothing more disappointing in sports when the team just comes out and says, we're tanking this year. That's it.
The worst.
Into relegation. Okay. JC, thank you so much for all of this and so much more. Check out allstarcharts.com.
Yo, Julie, what do you do about pizza in San Diego?
There's literally no good pizza here, but I blame the water. Although I will say, I'm going to give an honorable mention to the pizza place that is across the street from the studio. So when you come out here, we are going to take a walk